Write these 4 questions in your composition book and answer them. Pause the video while you do. Today we're going to be looking at thermal energy. If you remember from chemistry, the kinetic molecular theory tells us that all particles in all forms of matter are in constant motion. Thermal energy is the total amount of energy produced by the motion of those particles in an object. First, let's look at the relationship between temperature and heat. Temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the molecules in a substance. Remember, all the particles are in constant motion, so they have kinetic energy. Glue your thermometer in your notes at this point. The thermometer shows the comparison of Celsius and Fahrenheit. However, there is one other temperature scale, and that would be Kelvin. The Kelvin scale is an absolute scale, with 0 being absolute zero. So what is absolute zero? I thought you'd never ask. Absolute zero is the temperature at which all molecular motion theoretically stops. That's negative 273 degrees Celsius, negative 459 Fahrenheit, and 0 Kelvin. This temperature is so cold that the molecules no longer move. In physics, we must always use the Kelvin scale, so let's look at how to convert from Celsius to Kelvin. To find the Kelvin temperature, simply add 273 to the Celsius temperature. That about covers it for temperature, so now let's look at heat. Heat is the energy that is exchanged between two substances because of a difference in temperature. Another way to think of it would be the flow of thermal energy. Heat will always flow from the warmer substance to the colder substance until thermal equilibrium is reached. So let's look back at the first 2 questions I asked you at the very beginning of the video. When you touch something hot, which way does energy flow? Well, it goes from the hot object to you. And when you touch something cold, which way does the energy flow? It flows from you to the cold object because you are warmer. Now let's examine the relationship between temperature and pressure. Pressure is the force per unit of area exerted on a surface by a fluid. This is caused by the collisions of the fluid's molecules with the surface. Remember, kinetic molecular theory says that all particles in all forms of matter are in motion. As these particles move, when they collide with a surface, that creates pressure. So what happens if you increase the temperature? Well, if you increase the temperature, the molecules have more kinetic energy. They will move faster. This makes their collisions more energetic, so they exert more force on the container. This creates more pressure. Now let's examine heat a little more closely. We will also call this thermal energy transfer. There are 3 methods by which thermal energy is transferred from one substance to another. The first of these is conduction. Conduction is the transfer of thermal energy through direct contact. For example, the electric stove. The pot actually has to touch the burner for thermal energy to transfer. The second type of thermal energy transfer is convection. This is the transfer of thermal energy through the movement of molecules. The example I have shown here would be boiling water. The water on the bottom of the pot gets hot and moves up, and the cold water moves down, creating a convection current. Another example would be a convection oven that blows the warm air around. And the third type of heat is radiation. This is the emission of energy in the form of electromagnetic rays or waves. Examples include the fire shown in the picture, or a microwave, or the sun. Now let's look at the last 2 questions I asked you at the beginning. Which is colder, the freezing point or the melting point for a substance? Well, they're the same. And what is the difference between temperature, thermal energy, and heat? Well, thermal energy is the total energy produced by the motion, temperature is the average energy of that motion, and heat is the transfer of energy from a hotter substance to a colder substance.